Princess Maria Josepha of Saxony stands as a compelling figure in the annals of European royalty, her life a testament to quiet endurance amid the turbulence of personal and political upheaval. Born into the intricate web of 19th century monarchies, she navigated the demands of duty, faith, and family with a resilience that influenced the final days of the Habsburg Empire. As the mother of Emperor Karl I, the last ruler of Austria-Hungary, her role extended beyond the private sphere, shaping a legacy of moral leadership in an era of decline. Her story reveals the profound contradictions of royal existence: a devout woman bound to a scandalous marriage, a nurturing parent shielding her children from corruption, and a survivor of wars and exile who held steadfast to her principles. Through a chronological exploration of her life, we uncover the layers of emotional depth, psychological complexity, and historical impact that defined her, offering insights into the human costs of aristocracy and the strength derived from inner conviction. Early life and family. Background: 1867 to 1884, Maria Josepha Louise, Filipina, Elizabeth Pia Angelica, Margaretha entered the world on May 31, 1867, in the historic city of Dresden, which served as the bustling capital of the Kingdom of Saxony. This region, situated in the eastern part of what would later form modern Germany, was celebrated for its artistic and cultural achievements, from the delicate artistry of Meissen porcelain to the resonant compositions of its musical masters and the enduring presence of Catholic customs that permeated daily life. Her birth occurred during a period of significant flux in European history, particularly in the German states. The late 1860s were characterized by the push toward unification, with Otto von Bismarck's Prussia orchestrating the consolidation of power. The Austro-Prussian War of 1866 had recently humbled Saxony, forcing it into a subordinate alliance within the North German Confederation, which eroded its sovereignty and heightened tensions between traditional monarchies and emerging nationalist forces. Industrial advancements were accelerating, with factories proliferating and railways linking previously isolated areas, fostering economic growth but also social unrest. Amid these broader shifts, Maria Josepha's existence was shielded within the confines of royal privilege, where the rhythms of court life prioritized continuity over change. As the fifth-born child and the youngest daughter among 8 siblings in the Albertine branch of the House of Wettin, Maria Josepha grew up in a household that balanced opulence with discipline. Her father, Prince George of Saxony, who would ascend to the throne as King George in 1902, exemplified the stoic, duty-bound ethos of German nobility, emphasizing order and responsibility. In contrast, her mother, Infanta Maria Anna of Portugal, introduced a layer of emotional expressiveness drawn from her Iberian roots, creating a family atmosphere that merged meticulous structure with affectionate warmth. This duality likely influenced Maria Josepha's developing character, fostering a blend of introspection and empathy. Her paternal grandparents were King Johann of Saxony and Princess Amalie Auguste of Bavaria, while her maternal lineage connected her to Queen Maria II of Portugal and Prince Ferdinand of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, weaving her into a vast network of European royalty that extended from German principalities to Iberian thrones. Such connections underscored the strategic intermarriages common among dynasties, positioning Maria Josepha as a potential pawn in future alliances, even from her earliest days. The royal nursery in Dresden Palace represented a microcosm of privilege and regimentation, where Maria Josepha and her siblings were attended by a cadre of tutors, governesses, and attendants. Education began early, encompassing not only academic subjects like languages, German, French, and possibly Portuguese from her mother's influence, but also history, literature, and the fine arts, all tailored to cultivate refined tastes and diplomatic acumen. Courtly rituals formed an integral part of daily life, teaching the children the nuances of etiquette, from formal greetings to participation in ceremonial events. This structured environment, while providing security, also imposed constraints, limiting spontaneous play and enforcing hierarchies among the siblings. Maria Josepha, as one of the younger ones, may have observed more than she led, developing a sense of humility and adaptability that would prove vital later. Psychologically, this setting nurtured a reserved demeanor. Her earnestness and commitment to duty likely stemmed from the constant reinforcement of royal expectations, where personal expression was secondary to collective harmony. Yet, the veneer of grandeur masked underlying vulnerabilities. The family faced profound sorrows early on, with the premature deaths of two older sisters, Marie Johanna and Elizabeth, who succumbed in childhood. These losses cast a persistent shadow over the household, instilling in the surviving children, including Maria Josepha, a heightened awareness of life's impermanence. Such tragedies could have deepened familial bonds, as the siblings drew closer in shared grief, but they also amplified emotional sensitivities. For a young Maria Josepha, perhaps still in her formative years during these events, the experience might have fostered an early contemplation of mortality, prompting her to seek solace in the stability of routines and relationships. This psychological imprint of fragility reinforced the value of loyalty and support within the family, traits that would manifest in her later roles as a wife and mother. Central to her upbringing was the rigorous Catholic faith instilled by her parents, particularly her mother. Daily prayers, attendance at Mass, and instruction in moral principles formed the bedrock of her education, emphasizing charity, humility, and ethical conduct. Infanta Maria Anna, herself a model of devotion, ensured that religious observance was not merely ritualistic, but a guiding force for personal integrity. This emphasis on piety set Maria Josepha apart, making her appear introspective and somewhat isolated amid the more light-hearted or intrigue-filled aspects of court society. In an era when royal circles often buzzed with political maneuvering and social excesses, her faith served as an anchor, providing emotional resilience against uncertainties. Analytically, this religious foundation likely contributed to a psychological framework of inner strength, where spiritual beliefs offered a counterbalance to external pressures, helping her navigate the contradictions of privilege and loss. As Maria Josepha transitioned into adolescence in the late 1870s and early 1880s, her world gradually broadened beyond the nursery. Participation in court functions, such as receptions and family gatherings with extended relatives across Europe, exposed her to a wider array of influences. Dresden's architectural splendor, its Baroque palaces, opera houses along the Elbe River, and vibrant cultural scene, served as an inspiring backdrop for her growing interests in music and literature. She began engaging in charitable endeavors, volunteering with initiatives to assist the impoverished and ill, which not only aligned with her Catholic teachings, but also hinted at a developing sense of social responsibility. These activities foreshadowed her future wartime nursing efforts, revealing an innate compassion that extended beyond her immediate circle. However, the large family size meant that attention was distributed unevenly. As the youngest daughter, Maria Josepha often lingered in the periphery of her older siblings' shadows, including her brother Friedrich August, who would become king, and Prince Johann Georg. This dynamic may have honed her adaptability, teaching her to find fulfillment in quieter pursuits rather than seeking the spotlight. And psychologically, it could have built a layer of self reliance, preparing her for the isolation she would encounter in marriage. At the heart of these years was her profound bond with her mother, who embodied grace amid adversity. Infanta Maria Anna's Portuguese heritage enriched the formal Saxon court with elements of storytelling and warmth, regaling her children with tales of distant lands and royal histories that ignited Maria Josepha's imagination. This maternal influence provided emotional sustenance, modeling how to maintain poise under strain. However, the family's stability was tested by health crises, notably the severe illness of her youngest brother, Prince Albert, in the early 1880s. Maria Anna devoted herself tirelessly to his care, nursing him through nights of fever and uncertainty. This selfless act, while demonstrating maternal dedication, exacted a heavy toll on her health. Exhausted and weakened, she collapsed and passed away on February 5, 1884, at the age of 40. For Maria Josepha, then just 16, this loss represented a seismic rupture, stripping away a key source of guidance at the threshold of adulthood. The grief likely intensified her reliance on faith, turning her further inward toward a life of quiet devotion and reflection. Psychologically, the event embedded a resilient core, rooted in the lessons of empathy and endurance learned from her mother's example, while also underscoring the vulnerabilities inherent in royal life. In analyzing this period, the interplay of loss and piety shaped Maria Josepha into a figure of depth, where personal struggles forged a capacity for compassion that would define her enduring legacy. The profound loss of her mother and transition to adulthood, 1884 to 1886. In the early 1880s, as Maria Josepha approached her mid-teens, the Saxon royal family confronted a series of health challenges that foreshadowed greater tragedy. Her youngest brother, Prince Albert, born in 1875 as the eighth and final child, fell gravely ill with a debilitating condition that demanded constant attention. Infanta Maria Anna, Maria Josepha's mother, took on the primary role of caregiver, drawing from her own devout Catholic principles of self-sacrifice and compassion. Night after night, she remained at Albert's bedside, administering remedies, offering prayers, and monitoring his fragile state in an era when medical knowledge was limited. Diseases like tuberculosis or infections often prove fatal without antibiotics or advanced diagnostics. This prolonged vigilance, while rooted in maternal devotion, gradually eroded Maria Anna's health. At 40 years old, already burdened by the demands of raising a large family and fulfilling court duties, she grew increasingly exhausted, her once vibrant energy diminished by sleepless nights and emotional strain. Historical records from the period, including family correspondence and court diaries, paint a picture of a household gripped by anxiety, where the children's routines were disrupted by the constant presence of physicians and the hushed whispers of concern. The crisis culminated on February 5, 1884, when Infanta Maria Anna succumbed to her fatigue and underlying illness, passing away suddenly at the age of 40. This event struck the family like a thunderbolt, shattering the stability of their Dresden palace life. Prince George, Maria Josepha's father, was left to manage his grief while assuming sole responsibility for the children's upbringing, a task complicated by his own royal obligations as heir to the Saxon throne. The siblings, ranging in age from young Albert to the older ones like future King Friedrich August III, were thrust into a collective mourning that amplified existing dynamics. older children stepped in to provide support, while the younger ones, including 16-year-old Maria Josepha, grappled with profound disorientation. As the youngest daughter, Maria Josepha felt the loss most acutely. Her mother had been not merely a parent, but a spiritual guide, whose Portuguese warmth had tempered the rigid Saxon court, instilling values of piety, charity, and resilience. Maria Anna's death robbed Maria Josepha of this mentorship at a pivotal moment when adolescent questions of identity, faith, and future roles were emerging. The emotional void was immense, compounded by the practical shifts. Household management fell to governesses and aunts, but the intimate bond of maternal advice on matters from personal devotion to navigating court etiquette was irreplaceable. Psychologically, this tragedy propelled Maria Josepha deeper into an inward-focused existence where faith became her primary anchor. In the Catholic tradition upheld by her family, prayer offered a structured pathway to process sorrow, transforming raw grief into a search for divine meaning in suffering. She likely spent hours in the palace chapel, reciting rosaries or meditating on scriptures that emphasized endurance, such as passages from the Psalms or the lives of saints who had faced loss. This intensification of religious practice was not uncommon among royal women of the era, who often turned to spirituality amid personal trials. But for Maria Josepha, it marked a lifelong pattern of using faith as a shield against emotional turmoil. Historical accounts, drawn from later biographies and family letters, indicate she immersed herself in academic pursuits as a coping strategy, deepening her studies in theology, literature, and languages to distract from pain and foster intellectual growth. Charity work became another outlet. She volunteered more actively in Dresden's philanthropic initiatives, such as visiting orphanages or aiding the sick through church-sponsored programs. These acts of service aligned seamlessly with her Catholic ethos, channeling her anguish into tangible good, perhaps distributing alms to the poor, or organizing relief for families affected by industrial hardships in Saxony's growing urban centers. Such engagement provided a sense of purpose, mitigating the isolation of grief by connecting her to broader human experiences. However, the royal court's unyielding protocols stifled overt expressions of mourning, enforcing a facade of composure that forced Maria Josepha to internalize her emotions. Public appearances required stoic dignity, with black mourning attire serving as the only visible sign of loss, while private tears were confined to solitary moments. This suppression, typical of 19th century aristocracy, where vulnerability could be seen as weakness, likely contributed to a pattern of emotional restraint that resurfaced in her later marriage. The period also illuminated the broader vulnerabilities faced by royal women. Expected to embody caregiving ideals, nursing children, managing households, and supporting spouses, they often paid a steep personal price. Maria Anna's death exemplified this, her exhaustion a direct result of societal roles that prioritized others' needs over self-care in a time when women's health was secondary to dynastic continuity. For Maria Josepha, observing this reinforced a psychological awareness of gender imbalances in royalty where devotion could border on self-erasure. As the months following her mother's death unfolded, Maria Josepha navigated the delicate transition from adolescence to adulthood amid these lingering shadows. By 1885, the royal machine, the intricate system of dynastic alliances orchestrated by European courts, began to shape her destiny more assertively. Arranged marriages were standard practice, serving as diplomatic instruments to fortify monarchies against the rising tide of republicanism and nationalism sweeping the continent. Movements like those in France and Italy threatened hereditary rule, prompting families like the Wettins and Habsburgs to consolidate through unions. Maria Josepha's attributes, her piety, composure, and impeccable lineage, made her an ideal candidate for such a match, positioning her as a bridge between Saxony and potential allies. Yet without her mother's counsel, she lacked a trusted voice to navigate these negotiations. Her father and court advisors prioritized political gains over personal compatibility. By early 1886, at the age of 19, discussions solidified around a proposal from the Austrian court, leading to her betrothal to Archduke Otto Franz. This union, intended to mend ties after earlier rejections involving her sister Matilda, promised strategic stability, but ultimately ushered in profound unhappiness. It signified the close of her relatively sheltered youth in Dresden, where personal losses had been contained within family walls, and the dawn of a more exposed life under the scrutiny of Vienna's imperial gaze. The marriage, formalized later that year, would test the resilience forged in these formative years of grief and growth, highlighting how early adversities equipped her for future endurance. Marriage to Archduke Otto Franz, an early married life, 1886 to 1895. Following the profound loss of her mother in 1884, Maria Josepha's life began to align more closely with the expectations of her royal status, as dynastic considerations took precedence over personal recovery. By 1885, negotiations for her marriage intensified, driven by the Austrian court's strategic interests in strengthening alliances with Saxony. The Habsburgs, ruling over the vast Austro-Hungarian Empire, sought to repair diplomatic strains that had arisen from earlier failed proposals, including one involving Maria Josepha's older sister Matilda, who had been rejected as a potential bride for a Habsburg archduke due to perceived incompatibilities. Maria Josepha, at 18, emerged as a suitable alternative. Her composure, piety, and lineage from the House of Wettin made her an appealing figure for political consolidation. These discussions unfolded amid a broader European landscape where monarchies grappled with internal reforms and external pressures, such as the growing influence of Bismarck's unified Germany and the simmering ethnic tensions within the Habsburg domains. Without her mother's guidance, Maria Josepha navigated these arrangements with a sense of duty, though the prospect likely evoked apprehension, given her introspective nature and recent grief. The culmination of these efforts arrived on October 2, 1886, when Maria Josepha, now 19, wed her second cousin, Archduke Otto Franz of Austria, in a lavish ceremony at Dresden's Grand Cathedral. The event was a display of imperial splendor, with the Gothic architecture of the Hofkirche serving as a fitting backdrop. Guests from across Europe filled the pews, their attire resplendent with medals, sashes, and gowns adorned in silk and velvet. Jewels sparkled under the glow of massive chandeliers, casting prismatic lights on the altar where vows were exchanged. Diplomats and nobles raised glasses in toasts, celebrating not just the union, but the renewed bond between Saxony and Austria, which promised mutual support in an era of shifting power balances. Otto, at 21, cut a dashing figure, tall and broad-shouldered with a meticulously groomed mustache that accentuated his sharp features, earning him the affectionate moniker, the beautiful Archduke, among Vienna's social elite. As the younger brother of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir presumptive to the Austro-Hungarian throne, Otto represented a branch of the Habsburg family poised for prominence, though his personal inclinations would soon overshadow this potential. Despite the outward pomp, the marriage lacked any foundation in genuine affection, rooted instead in cold political calculation. The Austrian court had orchestrated the match to secure Saxon loyalty, viewing Maria Josepha as a stabilizing influence on the wayward Otto, while forging ties that could counter Prussian dominance. This absence of mutual respect sowed seeds of discord from the outset, creating a union where emotional intimacy was sacrificed for strategic gain. In the months following the wedding, Maria Josepha relocated to Vienna, the pulsating heart of the Habsburg Empire, where Emperor Franz Joseph ruled from the sprawling Hofburg Palace. The transition marked a significant shift from the relatively intimate Saxon court in Dresden to the multicultural vibrancy of Vienna, a city alive with artistic innovation where composers like Johann Strauss Jr. filled ballrooms with waltzes and opera houses hosted premieres that drew the continent's aristocracy. Maria Josepha adapted to the empire's rigid protocols, elaborate curtsies, hierarchical seating at dinners, and the constant surveillance of courtiers, while immersing herself in its cultural richness. Yet this new environment, with its blend of German, Hungarian, Czech, and other influences, also exposed the fragility of her marriage. Beneath the surface glamour of soirees and theatrical performances, tensions surfaced almost immediately as Otto's character revealed itself in ways that clashed irreconcilably with her values. Otto's infidelities emerged as the primary source of strife, evolving from rumors into notorious public scandals that humiliated Maria Josepha and chipped away at the marriage's fragile structure. Far from discreet, his affairs were brazen, involving a string of actresses, dancers, and singers from Vienna's bohemian underbelly. He fathered illegitimate children, including a son with ballet dancer Marie Schleinzer, whom he later formally acknowledged, granting the child a measure of legitimacy that only amplified the public spectacle. Another long-term liaison with singer Louise Robinson became a fixture in his life, with the couple often seen together at theaters or private gatherings, fueling gossip columns across Europe. These transgressions spilled beyond private whispers into headlines, eroding not just personal trust but the monarchy's moral standing at a time when democratic movements and journalistic exposés were gaining traction, questioning the excesses of hereditary rule. Specific incidents underscored the depth of Otto's recklessness. One particularly infamous episode occurred at the luxurious Hotel Sacher, where Otto was caught in a compromising position with a paramour. In a desperate bid to escape detection by authorities or witnesses, he leaped nearly naked from a window, an act that quickly became fodder for satirical cartoons and scandal sheets throughout the continent. The story spread like wildfire, from Vienna's coffee houses to Paris salons, portraying him as a caricature of aristocratic decadence. Another outrage involved Otto and his inebriated companions during a solemn funeral procession. In a drunken prank, they allegedly vaulted onto a passing coffin, desecrating the rite and sparking widespread condemnation. This led to a parliamentary inquiry in the Austrian Reichsrat, where debates raged over the implications for royal conduct, highlighting how such behaviors undermined the empire's authority amid calls for reform. Analytically, these events reflected broader historical shifts, as industrialization and urbanization fostered a more informed public. Scandals like Otto's accelerated the erosion of faith in monarchies, portraying them as out of touch with emerging moral and social standards. Maria Josepha bore these humiliations with remarkable stoicism, drawing on her deep-seated faith as an emotional fortress against the onslaught. Her Catholic devotion, honed through years of prayer and reflection, provided a framework for endurance, emphasizing forgiveness and perseverance in the face of adversity. However, Otto's mockery intensified the pain. He derided her piety in front of associates, labeling her the ugly nun or female monk, cruel taunts that struck at her core identity and highlighted the fundamental clash between her spiritual earnestness and his hedonistic pursuits. A lesser-known anecdote captures the visceral intensity of their conflicts. After a night of carousing in Vienna's taverns, an intoxicated Otto returned to their residence, pounding on her bedroom door in an attempt to force entry. Intent on parading her before his companions as a real nun, he sought to humiliate her further. Barricading the door, Maria Josepha trembled in a mix of fear and shame, her religion serving as her only shield. She may have recited silent prayers, as inferred by her deeply religious upbringing, though no records confirm the moment. This incident, though whispered among courtiers and rarely committed to official records, illustrates the profound emotional isolation she endured, confiding her deepest loneliness only to a select few trusted friends or spiritual advisors. Psychologically, such episodes likely fostered a pattern of internalized suffering, where outward grace masked inner turmoil, potentially leading to chronic stress in an era without modern therapeutic outlets. In their staunchly Catholic world, divorce remained unthinkable, as marital bonds were viewed as indissoluble sacraments ordained by divine will. Rather than seeking escape, Maria Josepha channeled her resilience into motherhood, redirecting her focus toward protecting and nurturing her children from Otto's corrupting shadow. Their first son, Karl, born on August 17, 1887, emerged as a radiant hope amid the marital darkness, his arrival infusing her life with purpose. She devoted herself to his upbringing, instilling the rigorous Catholic values passed down from her own mother, daily devotions, lessons in ethical decision-making, and an unwavering sense of duty to God and family. This hands-on approach ensured Karl grew into a principled individual, far removed from his father's flaws. 8 years later, on April 13, 1895, their second son, Maximilian Eugen, was born, further anchoring Maria Josepha's role as the family's moral compass. She homeschooled both boys in matters of faith, history, and virtues, deliberately countering Otto's influence by emphasizing humility, charity, and integrity, qualities that would later define Karl's short reign as emperor. From an analytical perspective, this chapter of Maria Josepha's life epitomizes the gendered imbalances inherent in royal existence during the late 19th century. Women in her position were burdened with preserving familial honor and dynastic continuity, often enduring public shame without recourse, while men like Otto faced minimal consequences for their indiscretions, shielded by patriarchal privileges. Her resilience drew from a psychological foundation of faith-driven forgiveness and obligation, allowing her to maintain composure under duress. Yet, this came at a steep personal cost. Suppressed emotions could manifest as internalized anxiety or isolation, reflecting the emotional toll of such unequal dynamics. Historically, the marriage's discord mirrored larger transformations, as escalating public scandals diminished trust in monarchies, hastening their decline amid rising democratic ideals and social critiques. By the turn of the century, these personal fractures would intersect with empire-wide upheavals, underscoring how individual lives intertwined with the fate of nations, motherhood amidst marital strife, and Otto's decline, 1895 to 1906. As the 1890s unfolded, Maria Josepha increasingly turned her attention inward, channeling her energies into the upbringing of her two sons as a refuge from the ongoing turmoil of her marriage to Archduke Otto Franz. With Karl, Born in 1887, already showing early signs of curiosity and sensitivity by the early 1890s, and the arrival of Maximilian Eugen in 1895, adding another layer to her maternal responsibilities, she transformed motherhood into a protective sanctuary. This shift was deliberate and strategic, aimed at shielding the boys from their father's notorious excesses, his frequent absences due to carousing, the whispers of scandals that permeated Vienna's court circles, and the moral decay that Otto embodied. Maria Josepha recognized the potential for Otto's influence to corrupt, given his public indiscretions and the way they eroded the family's reputation. By prioritizing her son's development, she created a parallel world within the opulent but fractured Habsburg household, one governed by structure, virtue, and emotional security, rather than the chaos of her husband's life. She took a hands-on role in their education, overseeing daily lessons that intertwined religious instruction with broader academic pursuits. Drawing from her own Saxon childhood under the devout guidance of her late mother, Infanta Maria Anna, Maria Josepha perpetuated a cycle of pious nurturing. Mornings often began with family prayers in the private chapel of their Vienna residence, where she taught the boys catechism, emphasizing themes of compassion, humility, and service to others over the conquests and power struggles, typical of royal histories. Afternoons were dedicated to history and ethics, using stories from European monarchies to illustrate moral dilemmas, such as the fall of empires due to personal failings, while subtly contrasting them with Otto's behavior. She employed trusted tutors for subjects like languages and mathematics, but personally curated the curriculum to instill Catholic values, ensuring the boys memorized scriptures and participated in charitable visits to Vienna's orphanages or hospitals. This approach not only insulated them from Otto's world, but also aimed to mold them into heirs worthy of the Habsburg legacy, principled leaders who viewed rulership as a divine stewardship rather than an entitlement to indulgence. Psychologically, this immersion in motherhood provided Maria Josepha with a sense of control amid marital powerlessness, allowing her to reclaim purpose through the act of shaping the next generation. It reflected a deeper resilience where her suppressed frustrations found outlet in constructive legacy building, though it also highlighted the gendered isolation of royal women, confined to domestic spheres while men roamed freely. Karl, the elder son, particularly embodied the fruits of her efforts. By the mid-1890s, as he entered his formative years, he displayed a thoughtful demeanor that mirrored Maria Josepha's introspective piety, engaging in quiet reflection during family devotions and showing early empathy toward servants and the less fortunate. This nurturing paid dividends as he matured into adolescence around the turn of the century, developing a reputation within family circles for his earnestness and moral clarity, traits that would later contribute to his beatification by the Catholic Church in 2004. Maximilian, though younger and more playful, also absorbed these lessons, benefiting from the stable environment Maria Josepha crafted despite the household's underlying tensions. Her emphasis on compassion over conquest, teaching the boys to prioritize peace and ethical governance, stood in stark opposition to the aggressive imperial politics of the era, foreshadowing Karl's future attempts at diplomatic resolutions during his brief reign. Concurrently, as the decade progressed toward 1900, Otto's unchecked lifestyle began to exact a devastating physical toll, marking a turning point in the marriage's decline. Around this time, he contracted syphilis, a disease alarmingly common in aristocratic and bohemian circles of fin de siècle Europe, where promiscuity flourished without the safeguards of modern medicine like penicillin, which would not be discovered until decades later. The infection, likely acquired through one of his many affairs, progressed relentlessly, ravaging his once celebrated beauty. His face became disfigured, with the nasal cartilage collapsing to the point where he required a rudimentary rubber prosthesis to maintain even a semblance of normalcy, a grotesque reminder of his excesses that he attempted to conceal under hats or in dim lighting. The disease also attacked his larynx, causing chronic inflammation that led to excruciating pain during speech or swallowing, and produced a foul, persistent odor that repelled even his closest associates. This physical deterioration isolated him further, transforming the beautiful Archduke into a reclusive figure haunted by his past. By the early 1900s, Otto retreated to a secluded villa in Dublin, a leafy suburb north of Vienna, where he spent his days in increasing seclusion. There he was primarily cared for by his long-term mistress, Louise Robinson, the singer who had been a fixture in his life for years. In a bitter irony that underscored his mocking attitude toward piety, Otto nicknamed her Sister Martha, evoking the biblical figure of devoted service while parodying the religious devotion he so often scorned in Maria Josepha. This arrangement spared Maria Josepha daily confrontations but did not absolve her of obligations. She made sporadic visits driven by a sense of Christian duty that overrode her revulsion and lingering resentment. These encounters tested her emotional limits profoundly, balancing the human impulse for compassion with the scars of years of betrayal. Psychologically, this phase plunged her into a state of limbo. Emotionally widowed long before Otto's actual death, she navigated a marriage reduced to formality, where affection had long evaporated, leaving only ritualistic ties. Her faith became a crucial tool for reconciliation, urging forgiveness as a path to inner peace. Yet, it could not fully erase the accumulated pain, potentially fostering a deeper introspection about suffering and redemption. The ordeal reached its somber conclusion on November 1st, 1906, when Otto succumbed to the disease's complications at the age of 41. His death, though anticipated, closed a chapter of indulgence that had defined much of Maria Josepha's adult life. In accordance with Habsburg tradition, he was interred in Vienna's imperial crypt at the Capuchin Church, a vault housing generations of emperors and archdukes, where elaborate funeral rites, complete with black-draped processions and tolling bells, masked the ignominious end of his story. For Maria Josepha, now 39 and officially a widow, this event brought a measure of liberation. Freed from the immediate burdens of the marriage, she reclaimed a degree of personal agency, allowing her to focus more fully on her sons and charitable pursuits without the shadow of scandal. This newfound autonomy highlighted her enduring strength, forged through adversity, and set the stage for her later roles in supporting Karl's path. The long-term impact of her maternal guidance became evident years later, particularly in Karl's marriage on October 21, 1911, to Princess Zita of Bourbon-Parma. At the wedding in Schwarzau Castle, amid the elegance of royal guests and floral arrangements, Karl confided to Zita on their wedding night, "Now we must help each other to get to heaven." This intimate vow encapsulated the spiritual partnership Maria Josepha had instilled, viewing matrimony as a sacred journey toward salvation, rather than a mere political or dynastic tool. It humanized Karl, revealing the emotional depth she had nurtured, a commitment to mutual spiritual growth that contrasted sharply with her own unhappy union. Analytically, this moment underscored how Maria Josepha's influence transcended immediate family dynamics, planting seeds of moral leadership that would bloom in Karl's efforts for peace during World War I. and ultimately contribute to his posthumous recognition as a blessed figure in the Church. Widowhood and personal companionship, 1906 to 1914. Widowhood ushered in a phase of relative liberation for Maria Josepha, marking a significant shift from the oppressive confines of her marriage to Archduke Otto. Freed from the daily humiliations and emotional neglect that had characterized her union, she now had the autonomy to shape her life within the boundaries of Habsburg protocol. Choosing not to remarry was a deliberate act that aligned with the stringent decorum expected of an archduchess in mourning. In the Austro-Hungarian Empire, royal widows were traditionally seen as embodiments of perpetual grief, their lives circumscribed by black veils and social isolation, rather than opportunities for personal reinvention or romantic pursuits. This societal lens reduced them to symbols of loss, denying them the agency to seek new forms of fulfillment or companionship. Maria Josepha's adherence to this norm was not merely a product of external pressures, but also a reflection of her deeply ingrained conservative values, rooted in her Catholic faith and the rigid hierarchies of the imperial court. She embodied the archetype of the dutiful widow, prioritizing duty and reputation over personal desires, even as the weight of her past experiences left her yearning for something more substantive. Yet beneath this facade of stoic compliance, a lesser-known chapter in her life added profound nuance to her narrative: her close friendship with the German-Austrian actor Otto Tressler. This relationship, far from the scandalous affairs that occasionally rocked European royalty, was a quiet interlude of genuine connection that illuminated the complexities of her emotional world. The introduction came from an unexpected source, Emperor Franz Joseph himself, who, having witnessed the strains of her marriage firsthand, sought to offer her solace. Franz Joseph, known for his own marital complexities and empathy toward family members in distress, facilitated this meeting as a gesture of compassion, recognizing the toll that Archduke Otto's infidelity and disdain had taken on her. Tressler, a respected figure in the Viennese theater scene, brought a fresh perspective into Maria Josepha's life. Their bond was primarily intellectual and emotional, forged through shared passions that transcended the social chasm between a Habsburg archduchess and a commoner artist. At the heart of their friendship were mutual interests in literature, theater, and faith, which provided fertile ground for meaningful exchanges. Maria Josepha, who had long been intellectually stifled in her marriage, found in Tressler a kindred spirit who appreciated her insights and engaged her in discussions on classic works of German literature, dramatic performances, and theological reflections. Their interactions often took the form of leisurely walks in the imperial gardens or secluded parks, where they could converse freely without the prying eyes of the court. These moments offered her the companionship she had so desperately lacked during her years with Archduke Otto, whose derision and neglect had eroded her self-worth. In Tressler's company, she experienced a rare sense of being valued, not for her title or lineage, but for her mind and spirit. This emotional sustenance was a balm for the isolation that widowhood, despite its liberties, often amplified. Inevitably, rumors of a romantic entanglement began to circulate in Viennese society, fueled by the unusual nature of their association. Whispers suggested impropriety, painting Maria Josepha as potentially compromising her widowly virtue. However, historical accounts indicate that she navigated these speculations with unwavering propriety, ensuring that their relationship remained platonic and above reproach. Reports suggest that upon Tressler's death in 1927, long after the initial phase of their friendship, She made a conscious decision to distance herself from any lingering associations, aligning her actions with the expected standards of a royal widow. This choice underscores her commitment to decorum, even as it hints at an internal conflict between her need for connection and the demands of her station. Far from a torrid affair, this episode humanizes Maria Josepha, portraying her not as an unfeeling pillar of the monarchy, but as a woman with a profound yearning for authentic relationships amid profound loneliness. It represents a subtle form of rebellion against the emotional barrenness that had defined her marriage, allowing her to reclaim a fragment of personal agency without overtly defying societal norms. Analytically, this friendship serves as a lens into the psychological dimensions of Maria Josepha's postmarital life, highlighting the universal human need for affirmation and respect after enduring years of belittlement and emotional abuse. In her marriage, Archduke Otto's constant mockery and extramarital pursuits had systematically undermined her confidence, leaving her in a state of chronic insecurity. Tressler's presence offered a stark contrast, a relationship built on mutual respect and intellectual parity, where her opinions were not dismissed, but celebrated. This dynamic not only provided psychological restoration, but also underscored the often overlooked emotional undercurrents in the lives of royal women. Historical narratives frequently focus on the political and ceremonial roles of figures like Maria Josepha, glossing over the personal toll of their constrained existences. Her bond with Tressler reveals the hidden layers of resilience and vulnerability, illustrating how even within the gilded cage of royalty, individuals sought outlets for emotional expression. It challenges the stereotypical portrayal of Habsburg women as mere adjuncts to male power, instead presenting them as agents navigating intricate webs of personal and societal expectations. Moreover, this period of widowhood allowed Maria Josepha to channel her energies into broader pursuits that reinforced her sense of purpose. She deepened her involvement in charitable endeavors, particularly those aligned with Catholic causes, which had always been a cornerstone of her identity. Supporting orphanages, hospitals, and religious institutions became a way for her to extend her influence beyond the court, fostering a legacy of benevolence that contrasted with the self-indulgence of her late husband. These activities were not mere distractions but integral to her psychological healing, offering a structured outlet for her compassion and a means to reaffirm her values in a changing world. As the Austro-Hungarian Empire teetered on the brink of dissolution, events that would soon thrust her into unforeseen historical roles. Her focus on philanthropy prepared her for the challenges ahead, equipping her with a network of alliances and a fortified resolve. In retrospect, this era of relative freedom, punctuated by intellectual companionship and charitable commitment, painted a multifaceted portrait of Maria Josepha, a woman who, despite the shadows of her past, found ways to assert her humanity in the face of rigid traditions. World War I, Son's Ascension, and Wartime Contributions, 1914 to 1918. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand on June 28, 1914, in Sarajevo, not only shattered the fragile peace of Europe, but also thrust Maria Josepha into the unrelenting currents of historical upheaval. This brazen act by Bosnian Serb nationalist Gavrilo Princip ignited the chain reaction that led to World War I, mobilizing alliances and plunging the continent into a conflict of unprecedented scale. In the immediate aftermath, with Franz Ferdinand's death, Maria Josepha's son Karl was elevated to the position of heir presumptive to the Austro-Hungarian throne, a role that carried immense responsibility amid rising tensions. The empire, already strained by ethnic divisions and nationalist fervor, now faced the prospect of total war, and Maria Josepha watched as her family's destiny intertwined with the fate of millions. When Emperor Franz Joseph, the long-reigning patriarch whose rule had spanned over 6 decades, passed away on November 21, 1916, Karl ascended as Emperor Karl I, marking a pivotal transition for the Habsburg dynasty. Maria Josepha, at this juncture, emerged as a quietly influential figure behind the throne, her role as the emperor's mother granting her subtle sway in courtly matters. Her pride in Karl's accession was genuine, rooted in her hopes for a reign guided by piety and reform, yet it was profoundly tempered by the ongoing horrors of the war. By then, the conflict had escalated into a brutal stalemate. Millions of soldiers from across the empire were mobilized, enduring the grim realities of trench warfare that scarred the landscapes of Europe from the Western Front to the Eastern battlefields. Empires teetered on the brink of collapse with economic strains, food shortages, and mounting casualties eroding the social fabric. Maria Josepha, having endured personal trials, now confronted the collective agony of her people, her conservative worldview challenged by the sheer magnitude of human suffering. Throughout the war, Maria Josepha exemplified unwavering compassion, transforming her personal sphere into a bastion of aid. She actively participated in nursing wounded soldiers at Augarten Palace in Vienna, which had been repurposed as a makeshift hospital to accommodate the influx of casualties. This hands-on involvement represented a stark departure from her pre-war life of imperial formality. Her gloved hands, once accustomed to the elegant gestures of courtly dances and receptions, now delicately dressed festering wounds, administered medications, and offered words of solace to the maimed and dying. This shift symbolized a broader democratization of suffering, where the aristocracy, including figures like Maria Josepha, could no longer remain insulated from the war's brutal egalitarianism. Pain and loss touched all strata of society equally. Her service was not performative, but deeply aligned with her lifelong commitment to charitable works, particularly those infused with Catholic principles of mercy and care for the afflicted. In the midst of national crisis, these efforts provided her with a profound sense of emotional fulfillment, allowing her to transcend the isolation of widowhood and contribute tangibly to the empire's resilience. From a psychological perspective, this wartime philanthropy enabled Maria Josepha to channel her inherent maternal instincts on a grander scale, extending the nurturing she had given her children to the broader family of the empire's soldiers. It offered her a renewed purpose, a way to find meaning in healing others even as the world unraveled. This mirrored her son Karl's own pursuits. As emperor, he initiated several peace efforts, including secret negotiations and appeals for armistice, driven by a faith-centered vision that echoed the moral and ethical teachings Maria Josepha had instilled in him from a young age. His reign, though tragically brief, lasting only until the war's end, bore the unmistakable imprint of her influence, blending humanitarianism with diplomatic resolve in a desperate bid to halt the bloodshed. However, the armistice of November 11, 1918, brought not triumph but catastrophe for the Habsburgs. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, fractured by military defeats, internal revolts, and the centrifugal forces of nationalism, dissolved into a mosaic of independent republics, including Austria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and others. The Treaty of Saint-Germain and subsequent settlements formalized this disintegration, stripping the monarchy of its territories and power. For Maria Josepha and her family, This meant exile, a forced departure from their ancestral lands into an uncertain future, marked by financial hardship and the loss of status. Karl's abdication and the family's relocation to Switzerland underscored the abrupt end of an era, leaving Maria Josepha to grapple with the ruins of the world she had known, her resilience tested once more in the face of irreversible change. Exile, loss of her son, and later reflections, 1918 to 1922. The monarchy's collapse in 1918 utterly shattered Maria Josepha's meticulously structured world, stripping away the foundations of her identity as a Habsburg matriarch. Her son Karl, ever the principled ruler, steadfastly refused to sign a formal abdication, opting instead to merely renounce his participation in state affairs, a nuanced stance that preserved his moral integrity, but invited inevitable backlash from the nascent Austrian Republic. The new Republican government, eager to dismantle any remnants of imperial authority, swiftly demanded the family's exile to prevent potential monarchist revivals. On March 23, 1919, Maria Josepha, alongside Karl and his wife Zita, embarked on a poignant departure from Austria, initially seeking refuge in the neutral haven of Switzerland. This relocation was not merely geographical, but a profound rupture, severing ties to ancestral palaces, loyal courtiers, and the cultural milieu that had defined her existence. By 1921, circumstances compelled a further move to Germany, where they navigated the precarious hospitality of former allies amid post-war instability. This forced displacement triggered immense emotional upheaval for Maria Josepha, who, in her mid-50s, confronted the abrupt loss of home, exalted status, and financial security. The psychological trauma of national defeat compounded her personal sorrows, manifesting as a deep-seated grief over the empire's dissolution and the vilification of her family's legacy. She grappled with the disorientation of reduced circumstances, from opulent Vienna to modest exilic abodes, echoing the broader existential crises faced by displaced aristocrats in the interwar period. The heartbreak reached its zenith with Karl's untimely death on April 1st, 1922, at the age of 34, succumbing to pneumonia while in exile on the remote Portuguese island of Madeira. This loss devastated Maria Josepha, plunging her into profound mourning for her beloved son, whose brief reign had embodied her ideals of compassionate leadership. Yet, amid the anguish, Karl's enduring legacy as a man of unwavering faith provided a measure of affirmation. His beatification by the Catholic Church in 2004, recognizing him as Blessed Karl of Austria, underscored his commitment to peace initiatives during the war and his devout family life, qualities directly traceable to Maria Josepha's rigorous upbringing, which emphasized moral rectitude and spiritual devotion. The ongoing process toward potential sainthood highlighted her formative influence, offering her retrospective solace and a sense of vindication in the face of historical erasure. In the ensuing years of exile, Maria Josepha contended with acute isolation, far removed from the social networks and ceremonial rhythms of her past. She relied heavily on her unyielding Catholic faith as an anchor, drawing strength from prayer and religious communities to mitigate the profound identity loss that afflicted many dethroned royals. This reliance not only sustained her through financial hardships and political marginalization, but also allowed her to preserve a dignified composure, transforming personal adversity into a testament of resilience. Analytically, her experience illustrates the psychological toll of regime change on royal figures, where the erosion of power intersects with the familial bonds, forcing a reevaluation of self-worth in an unforgiving new order. Final years in Bavaria and death, 1922 to 1944. Settling in Bavaria after the initial upheavals of exile, Maria Josepha embraced a life of deliberate modesty at Geiselgasteig, a serene suburb near Munich where she resided in a simple villa far removed from the grandeur of her imperial past. This setting allowed her to cultivate close bonds with the daughters of Bavarian royals, who formed a supportive circle of companionship, sharing in conversations about faith, family, and the lost world of European monarchy. These relationships provided emotional anchors, mitigating the solitude that often plagued displaced aristocrats, and reflected her ability to adapt by forging alliances within familiar social strata. As World War II intensified, the relentless Allied bombings over German cities compelled her to relocate in 1943 to the more secluded Wildenwart Castle in the picturesque Chiemgau region of Bavaria, a move driven by safety concerns amid escalating aerial raids. These later years became a period of deep introspection for Maria Josepha, where she contemplated the stark contradictions of her existence, the opulent splendor of Habsburg palaces juxtaposed against the austere humility of exile, forcing her to reconcile personal losses with historical inevitability. Psychologically, this reflection fostered a sense of acceptance, transforming adversity into a narrative of endurance. Throughout the global turmoil of the war, her unwavering Catholic faith served as an unshakable pillar, offering profound psychological stability by instilling hope and purpose amid uncertainty and rationing hardships. She passed away on May 28, 1944, at the age of 76. In the midst of the war's unrelenting chaos, her death a quiet exit overshadowed by the larger cataclysm. In a poignant irony, her remains were interred in Vienna's imperial crypt alongside her estranged husband Otto, symbolizing a posthumous reconciliation that transcended their earthly discord. This burial choice underscored the enduring ties of dynastic duty, where familial and imperial obligations persisted even in death, binding her legacy to the Habsburg tradition she had both suffered and upheld, controversies and historical debates. Maria Josepha's life trajectory invites a spectrum of nuanced debates among historians and scholars, each layer peeling back the intricacies of her role within the Habsburg dynasty. The scandals surrounding her husband Otto, marked by his notorious infidelity and moral lapses, have prompted intense scrutiny regarding the erosion of royal morality in the late imperial era. Historians contend that these personal failings not only tarnish the family's image, but also hasten the Habsburgs' decline, as they undermine public trust at a time when reformist movements and democratic pressures were intensifying across Europe, exposing the monarchy's vulnerability to internal decay and external critiques. Equally contentious is the evaluation of her son Karl's brief reign, where his earnest peace initiatives during World War I are alternately hailed as visionary acts of humanitarian foresight or dismissed as impractical idealism that failed to navigate the harsh realities of geopolitical alliances and military exigencies. His subsequent beatification in 2004 further ignites discussions on the fusion of monarchy and sainthood, with proponents celebrating his faith-driven legacy as a model of ethical leadership, while critics argue it romanticizes a tenure marred by political ineffectiveness and ultimate defeat, potentially sanitizing historical accountability. Maria Josepha's own strict, faith-centered upbringing of her sons draws similar ambivalence. Did it equip them with moral fortitude to withstand adversity, or did it enforce an inflexible rigidity that proved maladaptive in the face of revolutionary upheavals and societal transformations. These interpretations collectively depict her as a multifaceted figure, profoundly devout and resilient in personal trials, yet inescapably constrained by archaic traditions that curtailed her and her family's adaptability to modernity. Such scholarly debates illuminate the broader complexities of historical judgment, where biases in archival sources, often skewed by contemporary loyalties, or post hoc narratives interact with a delicate balance between individual agency and overwhelming systemic forces, reminding us that figures like Maria Josepha defy simplistic categorization, consequences, and historical significance. Maria Josepha's story continues to resonate with profound and lasting impact, serving as a poignant emblem of historical transition and personal endurance. As the mother to Karl I, the final emperor of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, she vividly personified the twilight of Europe's imperial age, a period when centuries-old monarchies inexorably gave way to emerging democracies and republican systems amid the upheavals of World War I and its aftermath. Her deliberate shaping of Karl's character through rigorous religious education imparted enduring lessons in ethical governance, emphasizing principled decision-making even in the midst of chaotic wartime turmoil. His eventual beatification in 2004 by the Catholic Church stands as a testament to this legacy, affirming that true integrity and moral conviction can outlast the fleeting allure of political power and imperial authority. From a political perspective, Maria Josepha's prolonged exile starkly illuminates the deeply human toll exacted by war and regime collapse, offering a timeless reminder for contemporary global conflicts, such as those in Ukraine or the Middle East, of the enduring emotional scars inflicted by forced displacement, loss of homeland, and the disintegration of social structures. Culturally, she embodies the delicate yet profound beauty of resilience in adversity, illustrating how quiet, unassuming strength, anchored firmly in familial bonds, unwavering faith, and acts of compassion, can persist and inspire long after thrones have crumbled and dynasties faded. In our increasingly polarized modern world, fraught with ideological extremes and ethical dilemmas, her narrative serves as a cautionary tale against the perils of personal excess and institutional rigidity, while simultaneously underscoring the invaluable role of moral fortitude in navigating uncertainty and fostering human dignity. Reflective conclusion. Maria Josepha's journey encapsulates life's profound contradictions. A pious soul wed to excess, a royal reduced to exile, yet prevailing through grace. Her legacy lies not in regalia but in human resilience, inspiring reflection on inner strength's quiet power. In remembering her, we find emotional closure in the timeless truth that true endurance stems from the heart's unyielding core.